So today I am going to be talking about my top 10 favorite Nancy Drew books from the original 56 books. So now that I have completed the entire 56 of the originals, I have to say there are a lot of books that I enjoyed and there's also a lot of books I didn't really enjoy. So I will be doing a part 2 to this video letting you know about my bottom 10 Nancy Drew books. But today we're going to be going over my top 10 favorites. Now I didn't really come up with any notes or anything for this video, so everything I'm talking about is going to be off the dome and from memory, so please forgive me if I mess up some details. 56 books are a lot to keep track of, and I have been reading the series for about 1.5 years now, so some of these books I have read quite a while ago. So I don't necessarily have these ranked in any order of well, this is my all-time favorite and this is my bottom of my favorites, you know. I just have 10 here that I really enjoyed. I feel like I'd kind of be splitting hairs a little bit if I was really trying to pick this is my all-time favorite one ranked, so this is just a group of 10 that were my most favorite. Now I also want to point out, if you guys have been following along on my weekly reviews that I do on these books, some of these that you might expect are not going to be in here. You would probably expect that all of my 5-star books would be in here, but I did rank a lot of books early on a little bit differently, and so now when I'm going back and kind of ranking these books or picking out my favorites, I'm going based on what do I remember from the book, how did I feel when I was reading the book, and these are not necessarily going to be the top 10 best mysteries. These are just my top 10 favorite and the ones that I enjoyed reading the most. So there might be a few in here where you're that's kind of an interesting choice, and this one wasn't ranked as high in your weekly rankings, so I am aware that there will be a little bit of discretion from that because like I said, now I am ranking these all from a whole standpoint of having read all 56 of them. So let's just get into it. I'm not going to be talking very extensively about these books because I have already done reviews on all of them, so if you are wanting to know more of my thoughts and opinions and a little bit more in depth in a non-spoilery way, definitely check out my full video reviews because I do have a lot of them. I will go in chronological order just so there's some kind of sense into this video. So I have book number 5, The Secret of Shadow Ranch. Now, I remember when I first read this book, I liked it, but I wasn't quite sure about the whole Western vibe. But now that I have read several more Nancy Drew books that do have the kind of Western theming to it, I definitely think that this was one of my more favorite ones just because the mystery of it was really interesting, the environment of it was really interesting, and of course, it is the first appearance of Bess and George, Nancy's longtime best friends. So this was just really a notable book in the series because there is a little bit of a shift between Helen and Nancy kind of being a duo to being Nancy, Bess, and George as the new trio. So I really do like this one looking back, and even though I don't think I ranked it as high, I nostalgically do really enjoy this one a lot, so it had to make my top 10. Next up I have book number 6, The Secret to Redgate Farm. Now this one is one that I felt was really interesting because looking at the cover and reading the synopsis, you know, my preconceived notions of what this book was going to be about was very different than what the actual story held, which I find is a little bit rare in the Nancy Drew series because so many times you see the cover art and you read the title and you might read the synopsis and you're like, okay, I can see how this whole story's going to go. But this one was just a really interesting one. I really enjoyed this one a lot. I loved the whole kind of perfume angle that was in this. I liked the kind of big reveal at the end, and so this was a really unsuspecting favorite of mine, but I had to include it on my top 10. Next up we have book number 9, The Sign of the Twisted Candles. This one was another, in my opinion, kind of one of those kind of monumental books, but not quite, but kind of. So in this story we see a the very first time we have a death of a character, which I think, you know, up until 9 books, we hadn't seen that before. So it was kind of a different plot as far as that goes. And then we also see a lot of internal friendship struggles between Bess and George and Nancy. So this one was just really entertaining, of Nancy kind of feeling like she's on her own this time and how she's kind of got to solve this mystery all by herself. So this was another really good one, and this one just had a little bit more of like that dark, creepy kind of eeriness to it, and we hadn't seen that too much in the Nancy Drew series up until that point. Piggybacking off of that last thought, this one, of course, if I had to pick one to be my favorite, it might be this one, and this is number 10, Password to Larkspur Lane. This is another one that just gives me the chills. I do think that this one is a little slow in the beginning, but once you get into it, and especially once you get towards the end of the story and you're really kind of piecing the mystery together, this is one that gave me absolute chills. I don't know if it's the cover art, I don't know if it's the theming behind it, but this one is, I would say, a pretty widely favorite of the Nancy Drew series, and I can totally see why. This one just has, again, similar to the last book, a little bit more of that nitty grittiness, a little bit of darkness, and this one just really kind of gave me that unsettling feeling. All right, the next one, like I said, you guys, some of these, they might be a little bit of an off-the-wall pick, but for me, I really enjoyed reading number 14, The Whispering Statue. This was one of the, not the first, but one of the first few that really kind of gave you that like summertime mystery resort vibes that tends to be a little bit repetitive in the Nancy Drew series, but this was one of the first few times that they kind of did that theming. And this one is a very art-related mystery, and I'm very interested in art, so that one was really fun to read. It's also the first time Nancy goes undercover and gets a job related to the mystery, so this might be one that a lot of people kind of overlook. But for some reason, this one just really had my attention, and I really kind of like the predicaments that Nancy gets herself into, and you're always thinking like, how is she gonna get out of this one? This one kind of had an interesting one, and I really enjoyed reading this one so much. Next up, another one that you might not necessarily see at the top of everyone's ranking list, but for some reason, this book really, I liked it so much, and it's number 15, The Haunted Bridge. Now this one, I feel like just looking at the cover art of it, you might not expect the whole story and the plot line. This one takes place at a summer resort with a golf course, and Nancy's kind of in the middle of this golf tournament while trying to solve the mystery, and this one just, another one that kind of gave me like little creepy vibes that I don't get that often from the Nancy Drew series. And like I said, I'm not a sports person, I'm not a golf person, but for some reason the vibes of this just really had me entertained. So this is one that definitely stuck out in my mind when I was going through all the books and thinking, okay, which ones did I really enjoy? This one just kept popping up in my head, so I knew I had to include this one in my top 10. All right, moving on to the next one. Again, as far as the mystery goes, this probably isn't like one of the best mysteries, but the vibes. I loved the vibes of this one. And this one is number 17, The Mystery of the Brass Bound Trunk. This one's just so fun. This is technically our very first international mystery as far as the original 56 go, because on this one, Nancy, Bess, and George are on a cruise ship coming back from the Netherlands, and they are in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean solving a mystery on a cruise ship. Now, if you're all into like the summer vibes of the mysteries, then this is definitely a good one. But what I really loved about this one is just that everything they are doing is like all contained on the cruise ship. And so this one just kind of gave me like a little bit of Titanic vibes, which I really love. Cruise ships are kind of an interesting thing. I've always kind of wanted to go on a cruise ship, but I've never done it. But this one just, in a weird way, I really enjoyed it. I almost, when I was reading it, could picture it like a little cartoon movie in my head, and this one just had some really funny elements to it, and a pretty, I would say another pretty big predicament that you wonder, okay, how is Nancy gonna get out of this one? So I know this one might not be another one that's on a lot of people's top 10s, but it was definitely a top 10 for me. All right, next up for the next one, we have book number 35. This one is The Haunted Showboat. Now, don't get me wrong, you guys, this book definitely has a lot of problems with it, and this is actually one of the first, no, it is the first Nancy Drew book that did not have an original text and a revised text. This is the only version of this book, so this is one that it just had a little bit of a vibe switch when you're reading all the revised ones, because this one I honestly do think has a lot of racially insensitive languaging, thoughts, plots, characters, dialogue, all kinds of stuff. So don't get me wrong, this book absolutely does have its problems and its issues, but I really did enjoy reading this one for the atmosphere and the mystery of it. Again, this one kind of gave me those like chills and vibes. This one is set in a swamp in New Orleans, and again, the spooky voodoo kind of vibes. This one was just such a good story, but it is very hard to overlook a lot of the racism and racially insensitive things in this book, so I do want to put this with a very large caveat, but I did enjoy this mystery so much because it just had a very rich atmosphere. All right, and finally for the last book in my top 10. This one, again, I'm gonna kind of give it a little bit of a caveat because it does have some of its own issues, but this one was still a very enjoyable book. This was number 38, The Mystery of the Fire Dragon. This is another international mystery. This one takes place in New York as well as Hong Kong, and this one was a very interesting story. This one actually is involving a missing person case, which we don't see too often in the Nancy Drew books. We do have a few books that do kind of deal with that storyline, but this one is really all about trying to find a lost girl. She is a college student and she lives with her grandfather. Her name is Chi Chae-sung, and she has gone missing, and it is up to Nancy to figure out where she has gone, and she travels all the way to Hong Kong to try to find her. This is another one that does have some elements of racially insensitive plot lines, which I am fully aware of and acknowledging, but I did really truly enjoy the story. It was a really fun action-packed mystery, and I just really liked reading this one. So you guys, that was so hard to really narrow it down to my top favorite 10. And like I said, not all of these are ones that you will see on everyone else's top 10 list. I'm sure there's a few of these that people are like, really? That's a top 10 for you? I hated that one. So I'm very aware that my top 10s aren't for everyone, but these are the ones that I enjoyed reading the most. They stuck out in my mind, and after reading 56 books, you know, a lot of it starts to run together after a while. So for these to have a bit of a lasting impression for me, they just were the ones that absolutely had to have been my top 10. So like I mentioned, if you want to know more of my thoughts about any of these books, definitely check out my Nancy Drew no spoiler reviews. I have tons of videos on every single one of these books. Some of the earlier books I don't go as in detail as I did in the later of the series, but if you guys want to know in a non-spoiler fashion just what I thought about them, funny little fun facts, or whatever it may be, definitely check out those videos as well. And I hope that you will enjoy reading these if you are trying to find, you know, if you're not wanting to read the books chronologically and you just kind of want to know which ones are the, you know, the higher up ones that are worth reading, I think that you can't go wrong with these. Alright guys, so that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok. Links are below. And until my next video, I will talk to you guys later. Bye.